All right, y'all, we're back with the Positive Vibes Show. This is part 2 of finding your passion and really getting your groove back. I'm here with Karin Monster-Peters, Linda Symonds, and Fiona Clark from all over the world. We're really kind of diving down, and it's really funny. We're kind of changing the format of the show. Like, it's evolving, like we were just talking about how your passion evolves. It really kind of changes. We're kind of evolving and changing the way this show is working right here. So we've decided to go a little bit deeper, and we've decided to, we all kind of touched upon how in our seeking for our passion, we really kind of had to go through what I term for myself personally, the dark night of the soul. And so I'll probably go ahead and start, so maybe everybody else can feel a little bit more comfortable about going through that. So back in the day, this would be 2007, I found myself where I had literally lost everything. I had lost my freedom, I had lost my home, I'd lost the government job you couldn't lose, I'd lost all my money, I'd lost my family, and I was, literally at the garage door with a bottle of Southern Comfort and 4 bottles of pills. I already had the playlist set up. I was just going to get in my PT Cruiser, turn on the air conditioner because I wanted to be comfortable, and I want to listen to great music, and I was just going to check out. And something I think Fiona kind of touched on, it was like I just had this knowing that there was something cool around the corner. I didn't know what it was, but I just had this knowing I was gonna miss out on something. And I also knew that my daughter would find me. And so I found a way to survive that night. And lo and behold, I just started seeking, I started asking not even knowing really what I was asking, I just sort of like asking the question of there's got to be more. And that's where, for me, I discovered the book, The Secret, which was the beginning for me. About really learning kind of really like who we are, what this, really kind of the idea of what we are doing here and really kind of what our purpose is, you know what I mean? And stripping away all this idea of who society says we are, because that was part of my dark night of the soul, I came out as gay at that time. I'd been married for 28 years. Kissed my first man when I was 44. So, I hadn't done, I had like stayed closeted literally in this space that really wasn't me. It wasn't authentic. It wasn't who I was, living in the deep South and having been abused as a child and just all these different things. People are always asking me, did you know? And I'm like, yes, I knew. But, when I was 17, it was still in the psychological books as a disease. And AIDS had just come out. I'd been molested as a child, like I say. So for me, it wasn't a viable option. So became, I took in food. I became 320 pounds right before. And then I had gastric bypass in 2005. I know I'm rambling all over my story, but I had gastric bypass in 2005. And I no longer, when I started losing weight, I no longer had that weight to protect me and keep me safe anymore. Now I was thin and people were noticing me again. It was like I was exposed. And so that's one thing I would definitely say to people, and I know it was true for me at least, that when people are taking on weight, a lot of times they're taking that on as a defense mechanism or protection mechanism. Not always, but for me it was. So just be kind of, mindful of how that's serving you. Maybe we'll get into a little bit about how things are always serving us in some way. But so I just kind of went down this road, and I think it's kind of funny because one thing I did was I learned about really the mind, body, spirit system and how you can hack it. And so one way I got out of this depression, you would not recognize me at all. I was so riddled with depression and anxiety and all this stuff. And one thing I made myself do is I made myself smile. I just made myself smile. It was like it would look like a jester grin. Sure, it was like hideous. But what happened was, my brain would feel the physical movement of smiling. It was like, maybe we're happy, and so, happy thoughts would start coming. And it was just this progression, Abraham Hicks for me was next, and Tony Robbins and all these great teachers that we have, and like my fiance say, Oprah is my Oprah, so it's about, really kind of feeding your mind with those other things. So that's my dark night of the soul. That's really where I started. And that's really where I started to learn what passion was and what it felt like and being able to tune into it. Who's feeling brave enough to go next?
I don't mind. Let's just go for it. Right. Well, my dark night of the soul is slightly different to yours, but actually, how long ago was it? 11. Am I still here?
Yeah, you're back now.
Sorry. 11 and a half years ago, I was with my ex-husband, as he is now, and we were in the Philippines. Actually, we'd moved to Hong Kong for 3 years, just over 3 years, and been in the Philippines about 4 months, 5 months. And I'll give you the very quick story. I adored my husband, absolutely adored him. And I remember even a friend coming in, and we'd been there about 6 weeks. I didn't really know anybody, obviously, at that, because I hadn't been there for very long. And I just looked at him and I thought, you know what? I'm so happy and I feel so blessed that I'm married to you because I love you so much. 6 weeks after that, 8 words changed my life forever. You don't do it for me anymore. And that was it.
Wow.
22 years, just poof, gone in a flash. No other explanation. Even to this day, I still haven't. I had 2 children of 7 and 9. Didn't know anybody because we'd only been there such a short time. You know, I just knew people to say hello at the gates of school, and that was it. So, and I had nothing in my name. I didn't have an ID. I didn't have my telephone. I didn't have a bank account. I had nothing. So it was more than the dark night of the soul. It was just like everything I knew, from, you know, your certainty, your security, your just everything had just been whooshed out of my life in seconds. So it took me a long time. I actually stayed in the Philippines for another 7 years, believe it or not. People kept saying to me, well, why are you still here? But I realized at the time I wasn't physically and emotionally strong enough to make a move to go back to the UK on my own. And also I didn't want to take the kids away from their dad. He remained there for a while, but then he moved away as well, but I still stayed. And it was a very, very interesting time because I built myself up, and as you do, one day at a time. And, you know, I would celebrate. And I think this is a really important point. When you do something, or when something is in such trauma and such shock, you've got to celebrate the blessings that do go well. It doesn't matter how small or how stupid they may feel to anyone else. I used to celebrate anything and everything. Even if it was like, I've got to fix the toilet, you know, oh my God, I've just done this, you know, because you have to become mum and dad and do everything. So, I mean, it was a really tough journey, but it took me on a magnificent journey. But the question that kept coming into my head was why? Why? You know, I'm obviously not lovable. I'm obviously not good enough. I'm obviously unworthy. You know, you go through all that head shit. And all the stuff from my very dysfunctional childhood came up about not being good enough. So that was just like a little pat on the back saying, yes, we've done it again. You really are not good enough. So that was really why I studied at EFT actually at that time. Because I needed to understand the why. I needed to get to the bottom of the why. What were the beliefs doing for me, destroying me? But so, and that just went on. So that took me about 5 years actually, until I had a pivotal moment. One of my other passions, going back to that, Pete, is cycling actually. I love my bike. So for my 50th, I bought my first road bike. I've got another one now, and I had a pivotal moment on my bike, and I had these words in my head that just said, I'm done. And that was it. I made preparations at that time to move back to the UK. It took me nearly 2 years because my oldest was just starting his GCSE exams. So I had to remain for those, which was fine because it gave me time to really adjust to the thought of doing this next big challenge, which was moving all of us and my 2 dogs back to the UK. So that is really a very quick story about my sort of darkest night of the soul, which really went on for quite a long time until I actually discovered what a load of twallop it was, because actually it's nobody's responsibility to love you. And this was the big learning that came up. If you don't love yourself, how can anybody else be expected to love you? So this was one of the biggest things. And the other message that really came through about this was, you are not responsible to make anyone else happy. And my ex, actually, when I look back now, he has just gone on, you know, he wasn't happy within himself. And I actually did say that to him once. I said, I did not make you unhappy. You are not happy within yourself. And that's got nothing to do with me, even though, you know, we are the other side of it. But it was a journey, and it has been a journey. So that's the quick story of it. But you know what? Every challenge has a gift, as I always say. And the gift is who you become at the end of the challenge.
Nice. Oh my gosh, that
Yeah.
just gave me chills. I love it. All right, who's feeling brave next? Karen?
So again, yeah, but I think it's so interesting, like that is there one dark night of the soul? You know, sometimes like dark nights that just kind of like come up. And I think when I'm looking at my life, when I look at my life, I've always had like this knowing that, my God, like happy and and this has to have a purpose. You know, I always had like this has to have a reason, because this cannot, you know, I would look around and I would see everybody kind of like going around like, yeah, this neutral energy, and my life was always going like, how can anybody be, you know, why is my life like this and everybody just goes like this? And I just didn't get that. And I was like, so that usually was, I was so, that had to have a reason, So I always felt that there must be something to it. And I had my first burnout when I was 18. Tried to kill me. I was out of the house. I didn't have money. I was stealing food. You know, I was already, my soul was already screaming in agony, like this cannot be it. And then later on, you know, little things were happening again, you know, and it was okay. And, but I think if I would think one night was a pivotal moment, I would say I was in a very abusive relationship, and I was, you know, always just taking it and always like trying to save the person or trying to help, and seeing the good in the person every time. And all of a sudden, you know, an explosive moment, doors were slamming, glass was shattering, and I was being called a bitch and a whore and everything that, and I believed it. And then in that moment, when the door shattered and everything just came down, I didn't. It was like all of a sudden there was that moment that, like, and I'm telling, this is my secret moment, like that. And you hear the universe just kind of like coming through you, and you see vibration coming in your body, and it said, just, you are worth it. You are worth everything you want. There is someone out there that can, you know, that everything you want, you are allowed to want it. And you're not a bitch for wanting it, and you're not you know, you're not anything bad because you want things when you want more in your life. And they're just kind of like, when that moment just came, I just started laughing. For me, I just started laughing. What have I been doing all this time, you know? And everything just kind of shifted and changed in many steps, of course. You know, of course, I mean, for me also, like The Secret and What the Bleep Do We Know, and then The Intention Experiment and Lynn McTaggart, and everything aligned. And yes, there were still moments that I was very much not in purpose, but really feeling that moment of alignment was so pivotal for me, because it was so real. I could feel the whole body. It was just so real that I always say that was my proof. That was like, we want proof, because it just was so present in me, and everything changed after that. So that would be, I think, a little, yeah, because there are so many stories. Oh man.
Yep.
Gosh. And I think that's the thing when we're talking about development. I think one of the thing that is, we have to have it right. We get it right away. It's right away. We never have bad moments. Oh, you're you know, you're a healer. Why aren't you healing yourself? Well, you know, So there are many stories and there are many moments, and they're just kind of like always kind of lifting you to a different level. But it's not like it's only gonna, my life is still not like this. My life is still very much this. That's part of my process. That's how I learn.
What about you, Linda? You ready to go?
Yeah, I am. Karin, I just want to say that that story just gave me chills when you were talking about the glass breaking and the whole door coming down and getting that epiphany from the universe. That was so, oh, that was so beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
But my story is a little bit more like Pete, and I obviously I'm not a spring chicken. And I have had many ups and downs in my life. I've been through an abusive relationship, and then I had, after I got out of that, I went on a really great part of my life, and then it goes back down. So I'm not going to go through all that. I'll kind of start at that moment. This is the deep, dark moment of the soul, is when I was ready to end my life, essentially. And so what I was doing is I was cleaning out these bookcases behind me. And I was going to take all of the books that I owned, and I was donating them to the Salvation Army. And I came across this, Infinite Possibilities. I don't know if you can see it. It's called Infinite Possibilities, Leveraging the Universe by Mike Dooley. Yeah. And I don't remember buying it. I have no recollection of how that got in my bookcase. I do not know to this day. But it was there. And I was, at that point, I was still working, so I was doing a 45-minute commute each way. And I decided to take these CDs and put them in my car, and I thought, I have nothing to lose. So I put them in my car stereo, and I let them play for 6 months. They played over and over. I never changed the station. I never put another CD in. I just let them play over and over and over. And after 6 months, and it's not an overnight thing. It didn't happen for me in the crash of a door. It took a very long time for me to start living in joy again. But that's how I found my way back, is understanding, the universe and the secret. And we've all mentioned the secret. And I had studied the secret many, many years before I got into my deep, dark depression, which was basically, it was for me, it was grief, because I had lost my brother, my two sisters, both my parents, and I was feeling very, very alone in the world. So that was my deep, dark pit of feeling of absolute aloneness, of not being really, genetically at least, connected to anyone on this planet in any kind of close way. Now, I still had a husband who loves me, and he's a wonderful man, but it wasn't enough. It just wasn't enough. And when I lost that connection to all of that DNA, I crashed. And it was Mike Dooley's teaching that brought me out of that. And then I realized after 6 months, and I'm starting to feel like, okay, well, maybe I can get some joy back in my life. And I'm starting to think of things I want to do and starting to want things again. Then I realized that I could become an Infinite Possibilities trainer with Mike Dooley. And that's what started my real passion of helping people. So I did that. I went to one of his Train the Trainers, and I became the Infinite Possibilities trainer. And then I became an integrative health coach with a focus on mental health. So really started studying how our minds work and how our bodies work in synchronicity with our mind and our spirit. So when I started to get into that, I started to realize that there was still a lot of learning for me, still a lot of healing for me. And my life every day is healing and growing. And, as I teach, I learn. So I would never say that I am there. I will never be there. I will never be healed from that moment, because, I still have moments when I feel very disconnected in the world. But you can decide at that point, how long do I want to let this feeling last before I move on? And that's what the one thing that I would like to say is I have learned from that deep dark moment, is that you get to decide how long you want to live in that place before you move on. And then when you find those tools that you can use to move on, then you have unlimited power, because you can say, I've decided I'm only going to live here for 2 days, or today is day 2 and I'm done with this. And then I know I have the tools to start moving forward again. So that for me is the big powerful thing of what came out of my deep, dark crisis of the soul, if that's what you want to call it.
And I love the idea of how I think it's almost the undercurrent of how we're honoring those moments. We're absolutely honoring them, and rather than judging ourselves for having those moments, we're realizing that that's just part of the evolvement of ourselves and of our lives, right? Because we keep touching on, I'm not there yet, it's still changing, I'm still fluctuating, I'm still experiencing those tiny dark nights of the soul. You know what I mean? And I think that's really, I think probably for each one of us, we were probably brought up in sort of this idea of this perfectionism, where I think it's probably why we all had these huge dark nights of the soul, because we fractured that idea that we had to be this, this picture of ourselves we had that really wasn't even us to begin with, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So I love that.
Definitely.
But I also love how we're also just making not only honoring those moments, but we're also proclaiming that it's actually a decision as well. It's a decision of whether, like Linda brought up, it's a decision to stay there or a decision to move forward.
Yeah.
Once you're able to. I love that.
Yeah.
Does anybody else have anything else to say before we end segment number 2?
Nope.
No, I think that's perfect. Love it. So that's been part 2 of the show today, and we'll be right back with part 3.